Omakase, the life and words of author M. Kieran. Hi there! If this is our first time meeting each other, let me give you a brief introduction. My name is Max. I write books for a living. I write every day. I prefer winter over summer, certainly winter over summer. My pronouns are they, them, and when posed with the question of which drink is best, coffee or tea, I stand right in the middle, proclaiming proudly and boldly, why not both? And welcome to the 4th episode of my writing advice and inspiration podcast. I actually don't have any housekeeping notes this week, so we can actually jump right into my week, and then the questions, and then the prompt of the day. But not a housekeeping note, but a reminder that I want to make every single episode in case you're wondering. The song that you hear at the beginning and at the end of the show is Dream of Green, a remix by the OC Jazz Collective and OCRemix.org. You can find the link to this track, where you can download it for free and find out more about the people who made it, in the description of this podcast. OCRemix.org is a great resource for music to listen to and write to. I love those guys. They're the best. So let's dive into the first part of the show, about the first third of the show, my week. My update on what I have been doing, what I've been writing, what I have been working on, and a little bit on the stuff that I've been consuming. You know, whether it is books, movies, shows. As writers, we consume the media around us, and it serves not only to inspire us, but also as a moment of respite, because, you know, life can't all be work. As for this week, I've had a bit of a paradigm shift, and I'm not saying that in the sort of work office, synergy, etc., kind of mentality. I mean an actual change in the way that I've been working. If you don't know, I have been writing every day. As of the recording of this podcast, I have a chain count of 71 days with no interruptions. I've been writing a little bit, sometimes a lot, sometimes a little, depending on what kind of day I'm having. But I've written for 71 days back to back. And it's been good. It's been actually very productive for me. In the course of the last 6 months, I've written 4 full manuscripts for 4 different novels, and it's been great. Getting back to the habit, and not only that, but also the determination to just sit down and get the writing done. I actually had a pretty rough day yesterday. Not rough as in bad things happening, I just literally worked for a long time. I had a recording session for my other channel, and we recorded videos for 10 hours, I think. So, excuse me if my voice is a little rougher than usual. It was literally 10 hours of recording. 10 hours of screaming. Not so much. Not so much. Though, things worthy of screams and shouts happened, but, you know, that's a thing for my other channel. But as you can imagine, after 10 hours of recording, I once again forgot to get any writing done, so at about 10:30 p.m. I remember, and I go over to my desk, and I sit down, and I wrote for a little bit, just to maintain the chain, just to not get away from the writing and from the story. And it's been fun. Writing every day has been very fruitful for me. But as I was sorting out my goals for July, I use bullet journals, so at the start of every month and every week, I kind of review my goals and what I want to do. What I want to get done that week versus what I want to get done the whole month. And my goal for July is to finish the revision process for one of the novels that I wrote last year. The code name that I'm using, I use the code name of the first name of my protag, so that you know what I'm talking about. And I can talk about the books without having to actually spill the beans on anything I don't want to talk about yet. So this would be Alba's story. A-L-B-A, Alba. And I have been working on editing that. Now you may be wondering, Max, if you're editing, Are you editing every day? And if you are editing every day, does that mean you're not writing every day? And the answer for that is no. I am not editing every day, mostly because it's a completely different creative process. I have been focusing more on editing and less on writing, partially because the book that I'm writing right now, codename Yolande, it's going to be a long book. Like, I can feel that I'm about the 65-70% mark on the book. And I know it's going to take a little bit longer than I would have liked because I'm shifting priority. I'm writing a little bit less and focusing more on editing. But that's the nature of the beast. I'll finish that novel while I'm editing something else. So this past week, I've been focusing a lot more on editing. And it's been a fun type of misery. If you have ever edited your work, especially work that you haven't touched in a long while, it's way different. It is way different than writing. And I am reminded of just how starkly different the process is every time I have to sit down and edit. And I wrote Alba around September/October of last year. And I don't want to say that I have improved monumentally in the last 6 months, but I do realize, as I transcribed the book, because I hand-wrote the entire book, I hand-wrote the entirety of Alba's story, and then I transcribed it into text, and now I'm doing the formal revision pass, which looks a lot like looking at what I wrote, figuring out what I was trying to say, and making it look and sound way better than it did originally. This is the thing that I bring up, but no one ever believes me. What your first draft looks like does not matter. You will forget to write something. I can assure you with crimson red hot certainty that you forgot to describe a location in your story. You know, if you wrote today, I am certain you forgot to mention something. Because we're humans. And because in the act of writing, sometimes we get lost in mentioning what happens next and next. We get lost in putting words one after the other, like bricks building a house or building a bridge. We get lost in that. And that's okay. You're meant to get lost in your first draft. You're meant to search for the way out, to get lost in that beautiful wilderness, to set sail for that unknown sea and wherever it leads. But when it comes to revision, it's almost as though you're taking your diary entries, you're taking all of the notes you took on your adventure, and you're now making it into a real story. This is why I don't want to say I find it troubling. This is why I want to inspire you to let go of fear. It's okay for your first draft to not look good. The only thing that matters, the only thing that has ever mattered, is making sure that first draft is finished. Once it's finished, once you let it sit for a little while, you can come back to it and make it what it's really meant to be. And, you know, I do feel that this book is requiring a lot more work. One, because it was the first book that I wrote after coming out of a really, really hard time. And it was my first book handwriting, which I did purely because, as I mentioned last week, typing became very hard. Thankfully, I'm back on typing. I've found my groove again, and life is better. Life is way better now. But I'm level-headed enough to tell that, or to say that there's a lot of work that book needs. But it's been fun. It's actually been really fun cleaning through passages, cutting, moving stuff around. It's been really fun. It's been that sort of thing where you think to yourself when you're writing, it's like, yeah, this line here, this is a good line. And sometimes it is good. But other times, when you arrive at it in the revision process, it's been 6 months since you last touched it. And you need time, by the way. You definitely need time to get away from the writing. Especially because we get really lost valuing our time. If you spent days just getting one chapter right, or trying to just push through one sentence that was being a problem. If you try to edit right away, you're going to be so attached to that you generally might not actually have the space to say, can I cut this? Should I cut this? I have done a lot of cutting. I have done mostly adding. As Stephen King said in his book on writing, some writers are taker-outers and some are putter-inners, and I am definitely a putter-inner. I end up having to put more stuff in the story than I take out, mostly because I always forget to describe locations. Spoilers. I always do that. And it's the sort of thing where sometimes I do describe. Like I have very vividly a passage from the book where I'm describing an abandoned street, and I did some detail work. I did some things that they were fine. They're fine. I wanted more, because I realized upon revision that is the one time when I get to anchor the viewer's point of view in the story. Up until this point, the viewer doesn't know what this world is like. They may be thinking that it's a world just like ours, that it's a modern setting where everything is just like we know it, but a little bit different. And I wanted the description of that street to be the anchor point, to describe to the viewer, to let the viewer, the reader know, this is not the world you know. This is not where you thought it was. It is different, drastically different, and inherently different for the story. And that's stuff that you realize once you have finished the book. Once you're finished with the book and you're reading through it and you're making edits and you are taking paragraphs that you spent hours working on and you're breaking them down. I do a lot of like this paragraph is good, but there's like 3 different messages that I'm getting across. So I give each one, I take each sentence and I blow it up into a paragraph, adding more to it, building up on the foundations of what I wrote in the first draft. But you can't know that when you're doing the first draft. You actually can't know what needs fixing and what doesn't in the first draft. You may be thinking to yourselves, Max, I think I know. And thinking that you know is one thing. Actually knowing is another. And I will never claim that I know in the first draft. If you see my notes on Twitter, when I post my updates, I'm usually like, I think this chapter is going to need to rework. I think maybe somehow I'm going to have to fix this other thing. Because you never know. I can tell you from experience that the things that I had been the most terrified of, every time, this happens every time, in the act of writing the first draft, let's say I'm on chapter 22 out of 30 chapters, and I'm writing it, and I realized, oh no, this thing, I forgot this one detail. There's one little detail, and it might cause a rippling plot hole. The whole story could be ruined from this one little detail. And trust me, I'm a Pisces, I've got plenty of apocalyptic thinking, I can feel like that really easily. And sometimes, chapter 22 out of 38 or whatever I said, I'm writing it, and I think to myself, this detail is going to be the pivotal point that's going to destroy the rest of the story, because I forgot, I overlooked, I did not brainstorm one tiny little detail. And what I do every time, because I know myself very well, and I know, Max, you're being a little crazy, just a little crazy. I make a note of what bothered me. You always make notes. You always gotta make notes. Do not expect yourself to remember later on. I never do. I always read over my notes, and it looks like the notes of someone who was always panicking. I do notes either in text or just scribbled on the margins of the pages, and they're always in all caps, and they always have like 3 question marks and 3 exclamation marks, and it always feels like, is this chapter clear in all caps? Or notes like, revise start of chapter so that it makes sense. I think I wrote quite literally that note in today's writing. But when it comes to revision, I pick through them, I look through them, and that one pivotal point, that one rippling plot hole that I thought was a huge thing that was going to ruin the story, I thought about it, I slept on it, I changed one line of dialogue to patch up the implications of that, and now the problem is gone. Mostly gone. I'll reach out to my feedbackers and see what they think about it. But it's a sort of thing where you don't know in the first draft. You don't know what's good, you don't know what needs changing. It's good to take notes on what you think might need changing. But really, when it comes to the first draft, you just gotta get it done. You just gotta get it done. There's no other way of knowing. And revision is such a wild process. Like, I have made so many changes. I've made so many changes to the first chapter of Alba's book. I've made so many changes. It's almost unrecognizable. But I do like, and I am proud that I always keep, I do versioning. So I'm working on version 0.1 as opposed to 0.0 of the book. 0.0 being the transcription, of course. And now I am on version 0.1, and I can just compare the word count and be like, yeah, no, I've added like 10,000 more words on the very first few chapters of the story just to make sure that everything is well described and it makes sense. And there's so much more in that first chapter. I was really worried about the first chapter. I didn't want Alba to come off as being a cruel person. I wanted her to come off as being factual, matter of fact, smart, but not in a mightier than thou kind of way. Analytical, the kind of person who just loves writing essays. That's the person who she is. And it was right there on my note. I'm looking at it right now. Top note for chapter 1. Make Alba not sound like a crazy person. Make her sound analytical. And I've been working a lot on that, you know? When I first wrote the story, I didn't realize that's who she was. I found that out at the end of the story. And what do we do as writers? We go back to the beginning and make sure that everything rings true from chapter 1 till the end. That right there is the process. That's the struggle. That's what we gotta do. That's the hardest part of the writing. But why do we do it? I love stories. This is fun. That first chapter is so different. I love it. It's so different, and the more work that I put in there, the more proud I am of it. And even though there's still a long road ahead, there's still a lot of work that I need to do, and I'm about 15-20% done with this pass. I still got to do more passes, but you know, I become more and more proud of it, and it's something that I want to show to people. I think to me, the mode that I always go in my head is I want to feel so confident with this story that it is so polished that I can get up on the stage and read it with confidence without second guessing my words. I want to get up on that stage before a crowd of who knows how many and be able to read my story without feeling that intense gut feeling that maybe I should have cut this whole chapter. No. Confidence and pride. Not in a sort of big-headed way, you know? Because I am merciless when it comes to revision. I want to be able to stand up there on that stage and read it. I guess confidence is not the correct word. Is it peace? Clear-mindedness? Absence of doubt. Is that what confidence is? I guess I will go with a complete absence of doubt. Stand on that stage with a complete absence of doubt in my story. You know? I don't know what other writers strive for, but for me it's always been that. I did a lot of creative writing courses, and I did a lot of being in front of the class, reading my work, and I used to dread it. I hated it in high school. Oh, I hated it. Partially because English is my second language, and I can assure you, phonetics in English don't make a lot of sense, especially to a native Spanish speaker. It took me a long time to feel confident just reading in class, and it's taking me a lot to feel confident reading my own work. But I despise that feeling where I would be reading my work and I would be self-editing. And I hated it not because I was losing momentum or because I was doubting myself in front of a crowd of people, but because I didn't edit that mercilessly when my task was to edit. So why am I now so self-conscious about the writing? I strive to treat my writing like I am there in front of the stage. As I've always said, write recklessly and revise mercilessly. There you go. I've been working on that for a long time. Write recklessly, get that first draft done, and when the time comes, revise mercilessly. But yeah, I've been editing. Sorry that I didn't get to talk about much else. I really haven't had much else going on this week. I've been playing games on the side, just small things to keep me distracted, or just to have fun and decompress when I'm not working. I wanted to talk about social media addiction, but I think it's gonna have to be a topic for another episode, because now that my update is over, it is time now to talk a little bit, just for a few minutes, about the sponsors of this show. This podcast is brought to you thanks to my patrons. Patreon.com/mkaren is the #1 place to support me and what I do. By pledging just $1 a month, you get to listen to this podcast a week before it goes live on YouTube, on iTunes, on Google Play, and you can also get an exclusive RSS feed that will have the podcast show up on your app of choice without you having to do anything. It's actually like a really cool system, and I love that I get to share that feature with you guys. And of course, the more you pledge, the cooler perks you get, like copies of my books, signed copies, access to my super duper secret writing zine full of prompts and inspiration, and of course, shoutouts. I want to give a big shout out to my super duper sponsor, Attilak. Attilak has a DeviantArt page over at deviantart.com/Attilak, that is AHTILAK, where they post their writing and their art. And I would also like to give a big shout out to the rest of my big sponsors, Howard, Amelia, Angela, Caitlin Bumbalo, Irina Phoenix, Joe, Luki, Mark Maruska, Polly Craftwall, Rain Misoa, and Soul Muse. If you would like to learn more about how you can support me and get cool perks, please consider going over to patreon.com/mkieran. And now, it is time for the questions. Every week, I take questions from my YouTube comments and from my patrons and from Twitter, and I take a couple of them to talk about, converse on this segment of the show. Today, we're going over a question about style and another question about what to do when life gets in the way, when life decides to throw punches and get in the way of your writing. As always, one pseudo-technical question and one all about the craft. And this technical question comes at a perfect time because as I am editing, I'm writing, I'm editing books, and I'm also doing feedback for a writerly friend, and this particular issue came up, and I love that the universe coordinates like this, because it gives me a chance to talk about exactly what is on my mind. So thank you, writerly friend. This question is about the use of parentheses in narration. You might have encountered them in the past, instances where an author uses parentheses to contain a statement, a detail, something they want to say to you. And the dear viewer was wondering about my stance on this, what I thought about using parentheses, and my advice for using them. I'm a bit of a radical, and I hold very strong opinions on things. I think that parentheses require a very specific kind of story and a very specific kind of narrator. My main issue when it comes to parentheses in narration is that it can feel that either A, the narrator is addressing the audience, and most of the time for the sake of a joke, or some sort of like funny quip, and that's not inherently a bad thing. Again, this is not about what's good and what's bad, what's effective and ineffective. And I find that little moments like that, at least for me, if it's just in a story that doesn't really play with it, it just takes me out of it. I'm reading a story and, there's narration and there's description, and suddenly in parentheses there's just a little quip about something. And it sometimes takes me out of it. Like, I feel that you need a very specific narrator that plays with it. The other use of parentheses that I see sometimes, that I find to be less effective than that, is when parentheses are used as a way of basically a semicolon, a sentence, usually with description or some sort of piece of narration, has an added-on piece of parentheses at the end to add in for a detail, for something that wasn't explained before, or something that should have been explained previously, but just until now, it hasn't come up. Now, the second one I find a lot less forgiving. Mostly because, and I'm saying this with honesty and with heart, it's coming from a place of love. Whenever I read sentences like that, like a sentence with a bit of an action, like this character goes and does this thing, and the sentence ends with parentheses saying, oh, by the way, this one thing that hadn't been described before is this way because of this reason. I don't like those, mostly because it feels as though the writer just realized they forgot to describe something. Like, you should definitely tell the reader as early as possible, especially when it comes to description, so that they have the image painted on their mind. It's a little silly, and I think we can all relate to this. Is the feeling of having been reading a scene and you realize that something you thought was going on is not going on, or something just pops into existence. The character walked over and unlocked the door, parentheses, with the keys that they were holding the whole time. And it really just feels as though, poof, keys just appeared on their hand. And that's not effective. I can go on for days about how that can just throw a reader out. And really, and this is coming from the merciless editor here, if it's important to know that the character's holding a keychain in their hands, why don't you just establish that the keychain was in their hands before they have to know about it? Again, I think that parentheses, for the sake of showing character for the narrator, I think those are fine. You need a very specific narrator for a story like that. The other issue that I want to bring up, and this is something that will become very relevant when it comes to you editing that story, and that is that if you want to write a story with parentheses or parenthetical statements, you can't just splash them in the story. I was doing feedback for a friend, and I noticed in their writing that they use parenthetical statements for about the first 100 pages of the story. And there's only about 12 instances between pages 1 and page 91. And for the rest of the story, there are no parenthetical statements. And the narrator does not address the audience like that ever again. And of course, that's a revision thing. That's the sort of thing where if you want to have a story with parenthetical statements and a character who addresses the audience like that, it has to happen all the time. It has to be a recurring thing. It has to work. And that's kind of the sort of thing you should take from revision. You should take from looking at your writing critically and trying to make it the best you can. Does it work? Does it have a place here? I honestly feel that the second example that I proposed, parenthetical statements that serve only to add in a detail that wasn't established before, I honestly feel those have to get ironed out during revision. Like, that's the only way. As with a lot of other stuff in writing, you have to look at it critically and ask yourself, is this effective? What am I saying here? Not to have another swerve into Max talks about editing for another 20 minutes, but there was one thing that came to me when I was editing Alba, and there was one sentence that I really liked. It was a sentence that I actually really liked when I wrote it by hand, back in September, October. But as I was editing it, the one thing when you're editing, do not allow yourself to go into auto mode. Do not allow yourself to just look at writing, trying to make it pretty and spacing out, paying attention to your music in the background. No. Music is fine, but focus on the writing. Question the writing. And that sentence that I liked, I was looking at it and going, what am I actually saying in this line? It sounds cool, but what am I actually saying? And I am not saying that you can't have lines that sound cool. That line sounded really cool, but when I stopped to think about it, I realized that what the statement that line was making was contradictory to Alba's character. It sounded really cool, but it was ultimately pushing against the character of Alba, giving you an impression of her that I definitely do not want you to have as the reader. Now, did I cut it out? Of course not. I adapted it. I changed a piece here and there so that the meaning was clear, and I don't think it sounds as cool as it was originally, but it's effective. And maybe on past 2 or 3, I can actually bring it closer to what I meant it to sound as cool as I meant it to. Or it might get replaced with an even cooler sentence. That's the struggle of revision. You have to look at your writing critically, and sometimes, I mean, most of the time, I think, if you don't have a narrator that supports parenthetical statements, you might be better off revising it. But that's the sort of thing that only you can find out. I am not here to make blanket statements, parentheticals are bad and don't use them. I think they're effective. I go back to Neil Gaiman's American Gods, which has a lot of parenthetical statements, and I found that those worked. I liked those. So, again, as they say, if it works, it works. So, find a way to make it work, or work them out of the story. And now, for the second question of the day, and another installment of writing advice that sounds just like life advice. A dear viewer sent me a question talking about how they were excited to continue on writing their story. They've been listening to my content for a long while, they've been paying attention, and they felt inspired to sit down, and then life happened. The random encounters of life struck again, a punch right to their chin, and they feel as though they have lost all of their motivation. Now, this is not... I don't think this is a rare occurrence. I think that every one of us, at one time or another, have to deal with this, with life getting in the way. But like I said, life, growing as a person, becoming a better person, is not about never falling down. It's about getting up whenever we fall down, and learning and seeing what we can do, what we can learn from the experiences we had. We don't have control over what happened to us, but we do have control over how we face the world moving forward. And that right there is the key that I would like to hand to my dear writerly friend. Yes, it sucks. It sucks when life gets in the way. And it sucks when you feel as though you have no more momentum and you feel emotionally and creatively exhausted. I've been there. I was there recently. And I think the most important thing, because the viewer was asking, they were saying that they don't want to let the story go. And I get you. They don't want to stop writing altogether, but they also feel conflicted because they feel exhausted. They're getting over life getting in the way, but they're a little apprehensive. And understandably so. What do I do when that happens? Well, I've been writing every day, and that helps. It helps because I post about it on Twitter. I let people know. I have a thread where I post every single day, and because of the kind of person that I am, I cannot allow myself to not write a single day. Not because of a pride thing, but it's because I've worked so hard. Even if I only have 10 minutes to write, then that's fine. I don't want to let go of the story. And like I told you, it's not about how fast you write the book. It's about just maintaining pace and finishing it. Because the only thing that matters, really, is finishing the book. Finishing it is the only thing that matters. However long it takes you is okay. As long as you don't give up, and as long as you don't stop. In my notes, I wanted to talk about time management versus energy management. Because I feel like I didn't get a chance to talk about that last week. Because I feel like being productive is not really about time management, but rather energy management. Because we all have the same time in the day, but we don't all have the same energy levels. Especially if you're dealing with, chronic illness, like some people I know, or you're dealing with, depression, or you just have one of those really, really bad jobs. I used to work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. Yes, I hated it. Yes, it was hell. And yes, I had to figure out a way to still write, to do the thing I loved. It was hard, but what helped the most, I think, it was twofold. It was, first and foremost, not letting go of the story. Don't let go of the story. Keep writing, even if it's just 10 minutes. I've said this before, but back when I was working at that bad job, back when I was working at the Death Star, I would actually write during my breaks and my lunch. I would actually, because I worked in this like big facility and it's this big laboratory, and I would just go all the way to the attic. There was this old desk there. There was an old desk and an old chair. And I remember over the course of like several days, once I found it, cleaning it, getting all the dust out, making myself a little nook. And every time it was lunchtime, I would rush up to the attic of that big facility. I would sit down and I would write. I would eat my lunch. Yes, I would eat my lunch. And in between, bites and spoonfuls, I would, be writing. And that was back in the day when I had a portable keyboard, like a foldable one. A folding keyboard that opened up and had a little nook for my phone. And I would just kind of put my phone sideways and I would actually type on my phone. That was a really good mobile setup. Yeah, that's what I called it. Yeah, it was my mobile setup so I could write wherever I wanted. And I wrote a little bit. 12 hours of work every single day is extreme. Dear writerly friend, I would like to inspire you to take it slow. 10 minutes of writing whenever you get a chance is perfectly fine. It is. And I know that someone out there is going to argue that 10 minutes is not a lot of time to write. And I don't think it's about it being a lot of time to write. But I'll just say this right now. As crimson as I know I can be, writing for 10 minutes is way better than the sort of writers who only write when they're inspired. 10 minutes of writing every day is way better than that sort of writer who only writes, every full moon or, every time they feel inspired. Consistency will get you there further. And sometimes faster. Like, listen, I used to write all day, 3 days a week, and now that I'm writing every single day, I'm getting way more done. Consistency. Consistency. The other thing that I want to say, take it slow. Life just got in the way, you're tired and emotionally exhausted, it's okay to just write a little bit. Even if it's less than that, it's okay. What I want from you is not for you to finish the story in 10-minute chunks, but rather to not let go of the story, to keep it on your mind, to stay connected to it, to stay there. Even if it takes longer, it's okay. The other thing is, writing in small chunks is good because you're giving yourself license to also, once those 10 minutes are up, you go do something else. Seriously. Resting is the right thing to do when you're emotionally and, of course, physically exhausted. Sleep in. Go watch some movies on the couch, in bed. Watch some YouTube videos, play some video games. Decompress. Get a little bit of writing done. Get your 10 minutes done. Get your 10 minutes, and then go sleep in. Do a couple of those, and then call me in the morning, okay? There you go. That's my solution. Whenever life gets in the way, stay connected to the story, even if it's just a little bit every day. And rest. Heal up. Because life does not stop throwing punches. So it's on you to rest up, get back in shape, and keep on doing the thing that matters to you most. In this case, writing. Oh man, I had a lot more to say about that than I thought. I'm going a little bit long today, but I think it's fine. Let's go into the third and final segment of the podcast, the prompt. Every week, I show up here to you. I stand on the stage and I propose a weird story idea. A weird scenario, or sometimes, like today, a weird concept. A weird concept for a weird story. Sometimes all you need is just a little seedling of an idea. Sometimes I bring you a whole scenario, a whole scene even. Today, though, we're once again just playing with the seedling of an idea. And I want to know what you would do. As always, the system is like it always is. I'm going to propose to you the prompt. I'm going to tell you what I would have done. I'm going to go over the questions, because we have to question things, because we as writers are curious people. And then, I would love to know what you would do. Let me know in the comments of this YouTube video or at me on Twitter. The instant that you start thinking about the story, the instant that you take this idea that I have and you make it your own, that you twist it, you morph it, you put pen to paper or your fingers to the keyboard, it ceases to be mine and it becomes yours. As always, your time, your writing, your story. It's not mine anymore. Though if you make something cool out of it, I would definitely love to see it. I mean, I want to know what you would do in this story. So, without any more preamble, because I have a lot of explaining to do, so let's just dive in. I came up with a weird story idea. And it's one of those very max story ideas. It's the sort of thing that I do when I look at something that I know, that I've known for a long while, that is not like common knowledge, and I twist it. And I ask myself, what would a story be like from the point of view of that person? And in order to fully explain this, I have to give you a little bit of background on a little video game concept. You know video games. Some video games, most of them, you play them, and when you finish them, they're finished. You experience the whole story, all of the levels, the entire world that the game had, and the game is over. Some games provide the player the chance to play through that game again from the beginning, sometimes with perks, sometimes carrying over everything they got throughout the game, sometimes only certain things. This concept of replaying through a game with added benefits, with all of the items you had, all of your money, all of your characters and their relationships. That concept in video games is called New Game Plus. You begin a new game plus something more. I was thinking about that because I love video games and I love to think about them critically. And I thought to myself, I leaned back on my chair like I am doing right now, and I asked, what would a story be like from the point of view of a character like this? A character, because picture the story of your novel. Picture the story of your novel. And now picture the main character who knows everything, maybe even gets to carry over everything they've earned. And they start once again on chapter 1. Now, I do know this sounds a lot like a prompt I brought up a couple podcasts ago. The prompt about a character who knew everything before going into the final encounter, into the climax of the story. And that is why this is not where the prompt ends. The name of the prompt that I want to give you today, the real prompt, because to me there's always going to be a twist. It's not just a character who is reliving the story that they have witnessed already, and they get to relive that story from page 1, maybe carrying all of their knowledge, maybe carrying everything. Just imagine that one story you like, where the character knows everything that is going to happen and has all of the lessons with them. Maybe all of their cool magic spells right from page 1. How different would it be? But that's not fun enough for me. So today I propose the prompt of this week, and I would really love to know what you would do. The title is New Game Minus. I imagine it like a lot of stories begin, like a lot of games begin. Our main character wakes up. Or our main character comes to. I've seen this twofold. I've seen like the classical fantasy idea, and I've seen like a contemporary one. In my brain, I imagine a character, their gender is not important. They're kind of young, I say like mid-20s. They open their eyes, and they find themselves in their cubicle. In front of them, there's a computer, and it has a wallpaper on it. It's a very specific wallpaper. Next to them, there's a corkboard, and there's things on it. Photographs, mementos, tickets to concerts, old concerts. The desk has little mementos, photographs, figures. It might be cluttered. It might just have a couple things. Our character blinks their eyes, and they know. Maybe they don't know. They feel that this place is theirs, but they have no clue who they are and where they are. Our character is beginning the journey from page 1 again. It is a new game, but there are no pluses. In fact, they're starting with less than they would otherwise. Because in stories, when they begin, our characters have backstories. That character sitting there, that cubicle, those photographs, it's them and their friends and their family. It must be, right? That ticket for that concert, it must be to a concert they went to. That little figure of that cartoon character on the desk, it must be a character they like. Except they don't know. Because they don't remember. They're starting the story. Being absolutely, truly being born on page 1. They know less than they would. If this was a regular new game, a new story, they would have a backstory. But today they don't remember. And this is not a matter of amnesia. This is not a matter of not remembering. I don't like that. Instead of our character not remembering, I love the idea of being unable to remember. The power to remember what happened before is completely lost to our character. They do not have it. They will never get it. Maybe at the climax, I don't know. But right now they're unable. And they're sitting there on that cubicle. Maybe they're feeling nervous. I like to think they're feeling nervous. And then someone walks into the cubicle and starts talking to them. Because everyone in this world is going on with the story, with the game, like it's business usual. And it is! It's an everyday day, in an everyday office. But our protagonist is anything but every day. That day is their first day, I think. Of course, there are things you can do with this, because I do realize that at the core of it, there's a lot of amnesia stuff going on, and I don't want to say that I've never been a fan of stories like that. Because right now we're doing the part of the show where I'm just, live brainstorming with you. And I don't know, part of me just really likes the cruelty of just being unable to remember. It's not like the character has memories that they forgot. It's that there's an absence of memories. There are no memories. You just began here, and you have less than you would have had when you began. In the process of coming up with the prompt, there were, of course, other trails of thought that I kind of stayed away from. There's the idea, if you want to play with the concept, of course, there's the idea of a character who is forgetting things as the story advances, or who lose things that they otherwise would have had. Imagine in a fantasy story the final confrontation between the ultimate evil and our party of adventurers, but instead of there being 5 heroes who unite from every single nation or something like that, there's less. Somehow, something went wrong. The story was supposed to be one way, but it's another. To me, the core of the story, the core of the fun part of this, is not only wondering why all of this happened. Why is our main character a blank slate from page 1? Why were they born? Why were they fully reset, unable to hold memories on page 1? Who did this to them? Why did they do this to them? That's part of the fun. Wondering, thinking to myself, what kind of entity, what kind of being, what kind of situation would need to transpire for our character to end up here? That's a thing to think about. Some of you might already be thinking of world-shattering realizations, cosmical implications, the nature of reality not being as we thought, and that's fun. But to me, the real core, the real fun part of everything, is to think not from the story's point of view, but from the character's perspective. What is it like? I feel that's the sort of idea that can propel me through the whole first draft. What is it like for a poor character, office worker person, to wake up and basically be born on page 1? Yeah, there's some sort of, implied knowledge, like they know they're in an office and they know they're standing in front of a computer. But the things that would make them a person, the memories that they should have because they're right there, the photographs, the tickets, the figures, none of it clicks. It's almost like you're sitting in someone else's cubicle. What's that like? You know me. You know the way that I like to do things. To me, the best part of the story, the most fun part of the story is character. So I always start a story with character. The fun part for me, and I can bring this back, when I wrote Alba, because, I was coming up out of a really hard time, and I wanted to handwrite as a way to push myself to break through that backspacing and deleting anxiety thing. And I actually, and this is true, I found Alba as a character, as a fun situation. In this world that is this way, Alba is the one person who is this other way. Not even in a magical sense. I love me magical settings, but that is just a real setting. It's a real cruel and harsh reality that she lives in, and I wanted to know what it would be like for someone like her to live in it. To see it through her eyes. To hear her inner thoughts. And to see how she justifies her actions and how she reacts to the actions of others. And I started writing that novel without any outlining. There's no outline for that book. There isn't any. And I remember, because I was at that point where I was terrified. That maybe I'd lost it, that I had lost the writing thing. And I remember sitting at a coffee shop with my notebook. My plan that day had been to go and brainstorm the story that day. I had an idea, I had an inkling, because I do, it's in the back of my mind. Of course I had an inkling of an idea. And I didn't want to wait. The idea of Alba's situation, her character's struggle, her point of view was so exciting, I just started writing. I just started. And it was funny when I was writing, not the following book, because that was Masks of Glass, the book after that, and I was like looking for the outline to see how I had done the outline for Alba, and I'm looking at the notebook and I'm like, there's nothing here. Did I not use an outline? And I remembered, yeah, I didn't make an outline for Alba. Everything kind of happened organically. And that's weird. But that's sometimes, writing is weird. It's downright bizarre sometimes. But it's fun. And I hope you have fun writing. Whether it is that crazy story that I came up with, which is now yours the instant that you pick it up and you start writing on it. It's yours. Or writing whatever you're working on. Have fun. Get lost in it. Get lost in the writing. It's the best part. And so, hi there. This is Max, also known as M. Kieran, and thank you for listening to episode number 4 of my writing advice and inspiration podcast, Omakase. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. If you are listening to this on YouTube, which, by the way, the podcast goes up there every week, so if you are away from your podcast app of choice, you can actually listen to it on YouTube. If you are, consider leaving a like. And if you are listening on Google Play or iTunes, please consider leaving a rating. This show is relatively young, but it would mean the world to me to actually have a few reviews to get the show started. And of course, as always, thank you. And now, it is the part of the show where I give shoutouts to every single one of my patrons. Everyone who's pledged at least $1 as of the recording of this podcast. I'm gonna go through all of them in alphabetical order, and here is my formal disclaimer and apology if I butcher any and all of your names. A big thank you from the bottom of my heart to A. Howard, Atilak, Alisa Dudley, Amanda Stevens, Amelia, Amy Palmer, Angela, Aniexo Hoshi, Biting the Sun, Blarg, Brenda, C.E. Richards, Caitlin Bumbalo, Cannibal Lily, Carriad Eccleston, Kathy Lindsay, Christine Dennis, Kristen Lofton, Citro, Clem Pastor, Carissa Glasheen, Dwayne Jackson, Arizos, Joffrey, Heather Tasker, Irina Phoenix, John Netz. Or is it Han? Oh my god, it might have been Han this whole time. Janosh Hibatsky, Jaytona Kirkwood, Jeffrey James Williams, Joe, Juan Nunes, K.M. Anderson. Actually, going back and thinking about Joe, it would be kind of cool. I don't know if the patrons would be okay with it. I might actually ask where everyone's from so I can actually make like a little map of where all the patrons are from. I was thinking about that because Joe is from Denmark. So I was like, oh, it would be cute if there was a little map where all the patrons are from. That would be cute. I'll think about it. Juan Nunes, K.M. Anderson, Kameshwar Rao Shaluri, Kaylee, Kiel, Kit Lee, Lear Killo, Lisa Effa, Loki, Mark Maruska. Oh no, I'm doing that thing where I'm falling into doing voice work. I recorded like 10 hours of videos from my other channel, Dango Duo. I don't know if I should pimp that channel on this podcast, mostly because that channel is we were joking about this. My partner and I were joking about this. That channel is me unchained. It's just me being like 110% silly, like I am, and I don't know. Oh, what? This is the most awkward place to have this conversation. Because this is the thing where, like, sometimes people leave comments where they're like, oh, Max, it's like you're two different people. And I'm not two different people. I think it's just different polarities on the range that is Max. You know? Because I do love stories, and I like to talk seriously about them because I take writing seriously. But I am also a huge dork who swears a lot. I swear a lot on my other channel. Like a lot. Anyhow, I also do voice work. That's why we ended up here. I also do like a lot of like voices because we read a lot of visual novels. Mark Maruska, Mary Foster Smith. So now from the rest of this, I'll be doing voices. Mary Foster Smith, Nicole Grissom, Noam Sahar,
Novels and Tomes, Pablo, Pat Eitzen,
Polycraftwall, Rain Misoa, Raquel Fernandez,
Roa, Shimmer Tales. Have I already read Eleanor? Wait a minute, did Eleanor's pledge not go through this month?
Eleanor's pledge didn't go through this month. Oh, I bet her card got denied. I am certain of it. I'm recording this relatively earlier in the month, so if you're not getting a shout out, it's just because Patron like declined your card. It happens all the time. Don't feel bad. Where was I? I was doing my Solid Snake voice.
Polycraftwall, Rain Misoa, Raquel Fernandez, Roa, Shimmer Tales, Sky D. White, Soul Muse, Sylvia Latilla, Synexia, Thomas Baker. Thomas Baker totally sounds like a Metal Gear character. Thomas Baker. And of course,
Wendy Christopher. There you go. But Max, aren't you worried about going full silly at the end of the video? Like, I don't want to say that everyone tunes out around this part of the show, but I understand people tuning out. I actually always stay tuned until the very end of podcasts, but that's because I'm a big weirdo. And maybe you are a big weirdo too. Welcome. Hey everybody. Welcome to the Big Weirdo Podcast. I'm your host, M. Karen. But yeah, so let us out of the way. I hope you guys liked this episode. I hope that the prompt was weird, but it's a sort of weird that I'm sure you all are used to, especially when it comes to my bizarre way of thinking about stories. And that's part of, I don't know, I feel like that's, excuse me, I'm dying. I feel like that's the writing thing. As writers, we're looking at the world around us and the things we experience, and sometimes the things we have taken for granted. You know, I was thinking about video games. I was thinking about that thing that happens in video games. New Game Plus. And I thought, what about the opposite of that? What would that be? And then I thought New Game Minus. Starting a game, a story, with less than you would normally. And I mean, it would be funny if I said that I didn't stay up late that night thinking about it, because I did. But it's fun to think about stuff like that. Even if you're not going to write a story about it. Listen, I'm busy. I don't have time to write that story. But it's fun to think about it. It's fun to stretch our writing brains, you know? And there you go.
the full spectrum of M. Karen. Silly voice work, silly lines,
updates on writing and the craft. This is what I do. I know, my voice work is not the best, I know. There's a reason why Yuri Lowenthal has not called me back. I just want an audition, I just want to get a try, you know? But anyhow, thank you so much for listening. You guys, all of you weirdos, listening all the way until the end, you're real cool, you're the best. I hope you had fun listening to the podcast in the background, drawing, making assets for your game, having breakfast, having dinner, going on a walk, walking your cat, cleaning your room. I hope you had fun, and I hope you were productive, and I hope that between now and the next time we meet, you sit down and you get some writing done. Okay? Okay.